Elementary-aged children who are deaf or hard of hearing need instruction and guidance to develop social language and understanding of themselves in order to be aware of why they have challenges and to develop self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and friendship skills. Also, as mentioned in the introduction, students who are deaf or hard of hearing will be referred to as students, unless otherwise noted when compared to those who are hearing. Language plays a critical role in the understanding of social norms and development of problem-solving skills. Students often struggle with making connections and understanding the social aspects of friendship because they lack access to communication with hearing peers and have limited or no opportunity for incidental learning or social norms. The following interview with Kalia by her teacher of students who are deaf and hard of hearing highlights the challenges she has had as a student who was hard of hearing, who was learning English as a second language in elementary school, and how it affected her ability to connect with hearing peers in her classes.
What was it like being hard of hearing in elementary school? What do you remember?
Growing up as a hard of hearing kid, it made it hard for me to learn because English wasn't my first language. I had a hard time hearing my teacher when they were teaching, especially when they talk quietly. I wasn't able to hear like other students my age. For example, when I was in 4th grade, my reading level was a second grader. I was a shy child because I wasn't able to speak English fluently. I didn't ask a lot of questions. Even when I asked, I can barely hear the teacher's response. It was also hard for me to understand and process the words. The fact that how fast I think and my response wasn't that fast as other students.
And how did you feel during that time?
I feel like I was left behind, like no one wanted to be close to me. I feel like I had a virus that stops other students from being friends with me.
Did you have difficulty connecting with students who spoke Hmong too, or was it just English learning difficult?
I had problems with both Hmong and English. It was more of like not hearing when someone is talking rather than the language.
You mentioned that kids would talk behind your back. What did you do when that happened?
It bothers me a lot, but I didn't do anything about it because I know sooner or later, once my classmate knows about my hearing loss, they will talk behind me, so I was prepared for it already.
What do you know now that you wish you knew then? What do you wish you would have done differently?
I would probably not even consider the words about me. I would take the time that I used to overthink to do something else that would help me better.
What do you think were the factors that changed how you felt about school socially?
I think it is just a time that helped in me because things like this cannot change overnight. It takes a lot of time to accept yourself and also for others to accept you. Another thing is that I think I was the oldest, so I had a lot of responsibilities, so I didn't have a lot of time to think about what other people think of me.
What about friends? When you were in elementary school, did you have any really good friends? And did you have struggles making friendships?
I barely have any friends as a kid. I barely remember my childhood due to the fact that my family always move all over the place, so I have to move schools as well, so this doesn't allow me to have good friends. So I was just on my own.
As you learned, Kalia had some unique challenges as a child who is hard of hearing and learning both the American culture and English for academics and to make social connections. This is important to remember as schools become more culturally diverse. Teachers for students who are deaf and hard of hearing frequently are the connection point between teachers of English language learners and the general education teachers, reminding teachers, staff, and parents that it is more difficult to learn English when you cannot hear it well and may or may not have amplification both in school and at home. Let's begin by discussing some home-based interventions. To help parents support their children, it is important to connect them to support groups or parent mentors. An example of one resource is Hands and Voices and the various activities and programs that they provide in regional areas. Another option to support parents and families would be for schools and programs to host family events within the district or region for all students who are deaf and hard of hearing. These opportunities to learn about the unique challenges young elementary children have when learning academic and social language are important to build understanding. These activities also allow students and families to interact with other families. Interacting with adults who are deaf and hard of hearing promotes acceptance and understanding within the family culture. When the family has a greater understanding of the journey and connections to role models who are deaf or hard of hearing, as well as a support system for dealing with unique challenges for both families and children, then they are more likely to provide an environment for the child that will foster positive social interactions within the home. Meeting deaf or hard of hearing adults and perhaps other families on a similar journey helps to provide validation to both the family and the child that they are not alone and there are connections after high school. It is also important for parents to hear lived experiences from adults who are deaf or hard of hearing. The following is a story that was shared with Jesselyn by a friend.
A friend of mine shared a personal story of something that she missed in her family's history. Here's her story. One day I was talking with my family about how terrified I was about being in a car accident. My dad explained that he understood how I felt because he had killed someone. I looked at him and said, "What? You killed someone?" He said, "You know that story." I replied, "I did not know that story." All of my family who were standing with me told me, yes, I did, because they had talked about it many times. I adamantly said, no, I do not know that story. I would remember something like that. Here's what I finally understood. My dad was a daredevil bike racer, and one time a biker riding in front of him fell off his bike, and my dad could not stop and ran him over. The simple fact that my entire family knew, but I did not, because I did not have full access to stories that were shared, impacted me. My family always thought I knew the story, and I always thought that I knew what everyone was talking about. It is so important for parents and teachers to understand that access at the dinner table, incidental learning, and all the things that students hear from others are not always available to students.
Another way to improve social functioning for children is participation in extracurricular activities. This can really be any community-based activity, such as sports, clubs, scouts, religious groups, or any other group with shared interests. Unfortunately, research has shown that students who are deaf and hard of hearing are less likely to participate in extracurricular activities. This may be for a variety of reasons, including personality and anxiety. It might also be related to the communication access, since group activities tend to have less structure, are noisy, and more difficult for children who are deaf and hard of hearing to access and navigate, especially elementary children who are still developing language skills. Parents are critical to encouraging students to participate in new activities and can also support language by talking about what might happen at the event. Teachers can pre-teach social situations to prepare them for what might be said and how to respond. Many children who are told to self-advocate and speak up know they need to do that, but often don't know what to say. Again, this is because they cannot overhear what their peers are saying, so preparation is key. However, participation in these activities teaches children important social skills like how to make social connections, how to analyze and adapt to social situations, and the understanding of concepts such as winning and losing. Participation in extracurricular activities also generally requires some degree of social interaction with same-age peers, as well as provides a shared topic for conversation. This increased opportunity for social interaction outside of the educational setting can support social skills and promote positive self-esteem, especially when children have a buddy system or a neighborhood friend that they are able to interact with in a smaller social scale.
When I was in elementary school, I lived in a small rural town that loved basketball. I had grown quite a bit and was tall, so people encouraged me to try out for basketball. However, I did not hear high-pitched sounds such as whistles. So being that I was the only student in the school that was deaf, I didn't know what was the norm when trying to figure out basketball. I remember one of my first practices. The girls were lined up and learning how to do the running drills, and I didn't know that they would blow a whistle to stop the drill. When we were running, the coach blew the whistle, and I kept running, and the others had stopped. I depended on what the others were doing to figure out what I needed to do, and was thoroughly embarrassed because others laughed. No one told me about the drill, so I decided it was too hard to rely on the whistle and not to have others let me know what was going on. Having someone pre-teach what would be happening, or an adult to come and explain to me what happened and what I would need to do, or someone to create a visual system for me, would have helped me stay in the game.
Anne's experience is common for students. The opportunity of playing basketball provided social interaction outside of the educational setting and created opportunities for positive social skill development. However, without prior information about what might be expected, her participation was impacted. The second category of research-based interventions are interventions that are provided directly with the student by teachers. First, and maybe the simplest, is to directly teach a correct or replacement behavior. Students don't always know that what they are doing isn't socially acceptable.
I have a friend who's a teacher. When she was a graduate student, she was eating in the cafeteria at Gallaudet University when a student near her farted very loudly. My friend looked at him and said, "Seriously?" He looked back at her and said, "Does that make noise? You can hear that?" She said, "Yes." And he replied that he was not aware of that. Ever since that time as a teacher, she has included teaching kids about bodily sounds and which ones can be heard. This includes farting, snoring, going to the bathroom, burping, and sneezing. She made it a fun lesson, but it was the most important social lesson for some because they learned it from a trusted teacher, rather than being humiliated or made fun of by hearing peers.
Direct instruction about what behavior is appropriate in a social situation, like in the fart story, is one of the most effective strategies to teach social behavior, social etiquette, and social pragmatic skills. A second student-based strategy is social activity interventions. These are activities such as playing games that teach students needed social skills. So if a student needs to learn how to ask and respond to questions, playing a game like Guess Who might be used. If a student needs to learn to understand the emotions or feelings of others, the teacher might use a role-playing situation where the student has to discuss the point of view of a character from a story they read. This teaches the student to understand feelings and emotions. If a student needs to learn what to do in a social situation, the teacher may role-play a situation where the student is the other person and the teacher becomes a student who is deaf or hard of hearing, so that they learn what to say. Then roles can be switched so the student practices what to say. This really helps students to think about how others are feeling and to develop empathy skills. It also gives students words to use in different situations, and that builds communication confidence. Curricula such as social skills training or providing alternative thinking strategies, also known as paths, are specifically designed to help regulate anxiety and promote alternative positive thinking. They also teach children how to identify and name emotions to be better able to explain how they feel when interacting with people. Many young children seem limited to naming feelings only as happy, mad, or sad. And so paths teaches emotional vocabulary. Both of these curricula have been studied and found to be effective interventions for students. Instruction teaching children how to advocate for themselves empowers them with making decisions and getting support, which also prepares them to communicate effectively in social situations. For elementary age students, this might be as simple as asking a buddy to repeat what the teacher said, or to practice in a small group using a hearing assistive technology microphone to be passed between the students.
A student shared his experience in early elementary school. Kevin remembers when he was in first grade and had just gotten hearing aids for the first time. He met his teacher of students who are deaf and hard of hearing and did not know how to use the microphone with his teacher or the other students. They played a game together to practice how to ask questions, but also how to play a fun game and learn the rules. His teacher set up a PAL day on Fridays, and Kevin picked 1 or 2 different kids each week to join him for different games so they could all learn how to use the microphone and to make friends. Kevin's hearing was better in his left ear, so he learned how to ask people to sit on his left side and in a comfortable place. Kevin remembers that later, when he was on the playground, he felt more comfortable about asking kids to play with him or joining them because they got to know him in a fun place.
The third category of research-based interventions are classroom-based. Research has shown that some changes to the classroom environment can greatly improve students' ability to interact with peers socially. Sometimes, a simple change can be made in the classroom to allow for more social interactions. For example, if the classroom is set up in such a way that the student is not able to see what is going on or not able to see their peers, the student might have difficulty with communication and consequently with social interactions in the classroom. Teachers of students who are deaf and hard of hearing can also help other teachers and staff understand why the child might answer questions that don't make sense, especially when classes are noisy or there is a lot of activity.
I remember when I was in second grade and in class. I got in trouble with my teacher because I didn't understand what the word purpose meant. During class, I survived by glancing at other kids' papers to figure out what I was supposed to be doing. I did something incorrectly, and my teacher made a mad face and asked me, "Did you do that on purpose?" I responded that I did, and wondered why the teacher was mad. In my mind, I thought the teacher asked if I did it on purple. And since purple was my favorite color, I nodded my head yes. I didn't figure out why I got in trouble until many years later, when I finally learned the phrase, "on purpose."
It is really important that teachers do systematic observations to observe students in less structured settings, such as small group work, gym, or on the playground, to help determine what barriers in the classroom might be interfering with students' ability to access and participate in social activities. Coaching classroom teachers to target specific social areas in the classroom can be really effective. For example, if there is a morning meeting time in a large group circle, the student might be very quiet or appear distracted because the microphone is not being passed, or she doesn't know who is talking and what others are saying. The classroom teacher might not recognize the social and communication obstacles during sharing time. Sharing can be difficult for young children who are not understanding what is happening and the questions being asked, and when they cannot hear their classmates. If the microphone is not passed between children and they cannot see who is talking, then they do not know how to respond or what to say. When young children do not respond in ways that are expected, this can make them seem odd to their peers. This in turn affects them socially. So it is important to be sure the student has access, especially during shared and fun times.
Due to not being able to hear, I would often stand there and smile. I wanted so much to be a part of conversations, but I couldn't understand. To avoid embarrassment, I would often pretend that I understood. Teachers need to teach self-advocacy skills in order to help students gain confidence. Teachers need to teach peers and other kids about our differences and to value diversity. When teachers focus on differences of all of us, it reduces the focus on one student. I had one teacher in my mainstream class that focused on embracing all of our differences. Each of us had a different topic to discuss that was personal to us. Some of the topics included wearing glasses or how we learn. Others were being deaf and hard of hearing. She made it engaging and fun and allowed for kids to learn how to communicate with each other and ask questions. The class also talked about the hurt we experienced when being called names such as retarded or deaf and dumb. We also learned the value of friendships. Teachers like this are not often found. It truly made a difference in my year when this was approached in this manner. She allowed us to teach sign language to hearing peers.
In noisy social situations at school, such as in the lunchroom or on the playground, teachers and other students might notice the student nodding, like in Jesselyn's story. Students frequently use the survival nod because it is so exhausting trying to figure out what is going on that students smile and nod, much like Jesselyn did in her previous story. Other students are concerned that they might look different, so they nod to pretend they understand. Others don't know they are missing information and think they're understanding and just agree. Teachers must help students to understand the impact of missed access to communication and teach them how to ask for clarification in many different ways. For example, sometimes if it's noisy, students can ask a trusted friend to say it again in a quieter place or to gesture. Teachers also must validate the struggle of not being able to hear everything and tell stories to explain how other students may have felt or dealt with a challenging listening situation by telling stories about other students in similar situations. Literature and YouTube videos of stories told by other students may also be used. Teachers of students who are deaf and hard of hearing should in-serve as classroom teachers and help them to recognize when a situation is not accessible. Rather than have students call out answers, teachers should call on students and identify them by name so that students can look at the speaker. Teachers should also repeat what students say during group discussions or when asked a question. Teachers can directly teach students how to communicate within large and small groups in a way that allows everyone to participate. One activity to support turn-taking is to have students pass a ball or another object during group discussions. This helps all students identify who is speaking and focus on what the speaker is contributing. Teachers should also structure small groups so that the students' group can move out into the hallway or to a quieter place. All of these accommodations should be made by the teacher in a way that does not single out the student who is deaf or hard of hearing.
I remember when I moved to a new small town when I was in 3rd grade. I was a solitaire in a town that had never had a deaf student before. Because I could speak, people thought I could hear. My 3rd grade teacher made me go before the class and show everyone my hearing aid and talk about moving from the East Coast. After that, the students were much less friendly and did not come up to speak with me and chat. Later, I learned from my younger sister at the school that kids thought I was stuck up. They assumed I could hear just fine with my hearing aids, and also because I had nodded in noisy places. I could not hear them calling my name when they were behind me. Many years later, as an adult, I learned to alert people if they called my name and I kept walking, that I was not ignoring them. I just simply could not hear them. So they should wave or tap my shoulder to get my attention.
Students who are deaf or hard of hearing need help to develop the language understanding of self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social friendship skills. Students often struggle with making connections and understanding the social aspects of friendship, especially when play becomes more language-based and less physical. It is the job of the teacher to facilitate the development of these skills using research-based strategies. Learning how to relate to people and understand what they're saying and what needs to be said again begins in the home and continues in school during small group and individual instructional times. Elementary students benefit from curricula such as paths, as well as small group times to connect in quieter, friendlier situations. Additional materials and ideas can be found on the resource list linked to this webinar. We hope teachers discover ideas to support social, emotional development and skills that are unique to students who are deaf and hard of hearing.